Imagine an election so secret, its results were erased from history. This isn't just a theory. There are records, fragments, and evidence that at least 8 popes were elected, and then simply disappeared from the Church's official timeline. They sat on Peter's throne. They were recognized, even if for a short time, as the highest leaders of Christendom. But today, almost no one remembers their names. I'm Tom, and here on Time to History, we revive the stories the world tried to forget. If you enjoy diving into hidden topics, historical curiosities, and truths few people talk about, go ahead and subscribe, like this video, and hit the notification bell. Stick around until the end, because the final revelation is simply unbelievable and real. Before we continue, one important note. This video is not an attack on faith, religion, or the Catholic Church. On the contrary, it's a historical analysis, based on real sources, ancient documents, and episodes that raise more questions than answers. With that said, let's go back in time and uncover the conclave the Vatican never wanted you to know about. Our journey begins with a name that technically was a pope, but the Church later chose to bury as a mistake. Christopher. He took the papal throne in 903, during one of the most chaotic periods in Church history, a time of corruption, political manipulation, and violence inside the Vatican itself. Christopher succeeded Pope Leo V, in what many historians believe was an internal coup. He ruled for nearly a year, signed documents, made decisions, and was officially recognized during his lifetime. But something changed. Soon after, a new pope appeared, Sergius III. And with him came the rewriting of history. Sergius declared that Christopher was never truly pope. He labeled him an antipope and erased him from the official succession. Documents were annulled. His name vanished from the records. His legacy turned to shadow. But contemporary sources say otherwise. Some ancient texts still refer to him as Pope Christopher. Others say he was imprisoned, forced to resign, or even killed inside the Vatican walls. To this day, the Vatican does not officially recognize Christopher as a pope. But in many older lists, there he is, sitting on the throne. That's why he's the first name on our list of popes erased from history. The second name on the list was also chosen as pope, but ended up on the losing side of history. John XVI, born John Philagathos, was a respected monk and the secretary to Emperor Otto III. During a bitter papal dispute, John was installed by Byzantine-backed forces hoping to weaken the official pope in Rome. In 997, he was proclaimed pope with full support from military and political powers. But the throne in Rome was already occupied by Gregory V, a 24-year-old pope loyal to the Holy Roman Empire. The result? A war between two papal lines. One official, one declared an antipope. But John's fall wasn't just political. It was brutal. After Gregory regained control, John was captured. What happened next is disturbing. John was publicly mutilated. His nose, ears, and tongue were cut off. He was paraded through the streets of Rome, riding backward on a donkey. A public display of shame and defeat. Then he was locked away in a monastery, where he lived out his final days in silence. The Church never spoke of him again. And even today, the name John XVI is skipped on the official papal list. The next pope to use the name was John XVII. As if John XVI had never existed. A forbidden name. An ignored number. A pope erased by the Vatican, but remembered by history. Next on the list is one of the most scandalous names in the history of the papacy. Benedict IX. He was elected pope in 1032 thanks to the influence of his powerful family, the Counts of Tusculum. But the problem wasn't just nepotism. It was Benedict himself. He was described as violent, immoral, and corrupt. He treated the papacy like personal property. In 1045, after multiple scandals and growing pressure, he sold the papal throne to his own godfather, who became Pope Gregory VI. That's right. He sold the papacy, for money. Benedict returned to power more than once. throwing the Vatican into a deep crisis. In the end, he was excommunicated, and his name became a symbol of everything wrong with the Church at that time. Technically, he's still recognized as Pope, but the Church spent centuries trying to erase his legacy. A Pope elected 3 times, and forgotten 3 times over. Let's go even further back, to a time when popes were caught between empires. Silverius was elected pope in 536, during a war between the Byzantine Empire and barbarian kingdoms in Italy. But he stood in the way of Empress Theodora of the East, and she wanted someone else on the throne. Silverius was falsely accused of treason. He was deposed, exiled, and died shortly after, isolated and forgotten. He was replaced by Vigilius, the Pope Theodora had wanted all along. The Church later canonized Silverius, but for centuries, his name was quietly pushed aside. He was a political casualty, a name left behind in diplomatic silence. Now let's look at a pope who stepped down voluntarily, and still ended up erased. Celestine V was a hermit, a deeply spiritual man who lived in isolation. After the throne stayed empty for 2 years, he was chosen as a spiritual solution. But his simplicity didn't mix well with Vatican politics. Confused, pressured, and manipulated, Celestine resigned just 5 months after his election. His successor, Boniface VIII, had him imprisoned, afraid Celestine might become a symbol of resistance. Celestine died behind bars. Some believe Boniface worked to erase his memory, worried the people might still see him as the true pope. And for a long time, Celestine V was treated as a mistake, a humble soul, buried by power. Now we come to the strangest case on the entire list. The name, John the 20th. Because officially, he never existed. In the official papal records, the list goes from John the 19th straight to John the 21st. Why? Some say it was just a numbering error, confusion in the official count. But others believe there really was a John the 20th. A pope who briefly held power, then was removed and erased. A ghost between 2 names. A number skipped on purpose. A forgotten pope, possibly never forgiven. And then came the Western Schism, the greatest identity crisis the papacy has ever seen. For nearly 40 years, the Church was divided. At one point, there were 2, even 3, men claiming to be the one true pope. Rome, Avignon, Pisa. Each side had its own pope, its own followers, its own court. Figures like Clement VII and Benedict XIII ruled with full authority, gathering believers, issuing decrees, and excommunicating their rivals. But when the schism ended, the Church declared them all antipopes. Their names were deleted from official lists. Their influence wiped clean. Decades of decisions vanished from history. One of the largest editorial cuts ever made to a religious institution. And finally, the most recent name on this forgotten list. John Paul I. He was elected in 1978. Simple, charismatic, and full of bold ideas. But he died just 33 days after taking office. The official version, a sudden heart attack. But the timeline was strange. Documents disappeared. Testimonies changed. And reports surfaced that he had planned to expose corruption inside the Church. Many asked the same question. What did he know? And more importantly, why was everything covered up so quickly? He is officially recognized today. But when people talk about the most influential popes, John Paul I is barely mentioned. His reign was so brief, it became nearly invisible. The papacy is one of the oldest and most powerful institutions in human history. But even here, there are shadows. Erased names. Forgotten thrones. Conclaves no one dares to speak of. 8 popes. 8 stories that official history tried to leave behind. But today, we brought them back. Now that you know the truth, how many more names are still hidden in the dark? If this video gave you a new perspective, leave a like, drop a comment, and share it with someone who needs to see the other side of Vatican history. This is Time to History.